Welcome to Successful Parenting, where we, Jackie Rue and Robin Choquette, share practical skills for families to build resilience and healthy connections. As practicing professionals and parents ourselves, we hope this podcast is a resource for parents to grow, reflect, and learn more about themselves and their children. Our approach is simple, tangible, and most importantly, we lead with compassion for the integrity of the families we serve. This podcast should not be taken as medical advice and is intended for informational purposes only. We love our work, and we can't wait to watch families gain confidence and open themselves up to new ways of successful parenting. Hello, Jackie.
Hello, Robin.
How are you doing this morning?
I am doing good. The sun's out, so I'm always happy when the sun's out.
Yes.
How are you, Robin?
I'm good. I have been feeling a little bit under the weather, and I woke up this morning and it's like, that moment when you kind of flip back to kind of yourself. I'm not 100%, but I am feeling so much better. So I just have to be careful because I've already done a bunch this morning. So, when that change happens, you're just full of energy and ready to go. So that feels really good.
Well, I am glad you found your energy this morning because I think the topic we're going to talk about today is going to be of high interest for many of our listeners. And it's a topic sometimes I think folks shy away from, and I'm not quite sure why, because I think it's a topic that is really, really so important.
Yes, I agree with you. I think they're uncertain and they're not sure how people stand. And some people may have a strong reaction and really can, I think, become almost aggressive or defensive. And it's just conversations. And I think if we start to look at it in those terms of let's have conversations as opportunities to learn and to grow, I think that would make easier to approach.
Well, and I think one thing I've learned from our last couple episodes is the things that I sometimes stay away from are the things I'm not educated on.
Yes.
And I know I've learned a lot in the last couple just weeks talking to different experts. And the more I learn, the less I feel like I want to shy away from it because there's so many things I think I just don't understand. And the more I learn, the more I'm equipped to be able to gain more insight and want to be more involved in the topic. So, this topic we're going to be talking about today is gun safety. And one of the things I was reading when I was doing some research on the topic is just how much education around gun safety can save lives and how much understanding it and gaining knowledge really is power. Because I think so often, like you said, we can have a view, guns are just bad or guns are just good. And it's really what we're going to be talking about today is not, are guns a good thing to have or not a good thing to have? We're going to be talking about gun safety. And several weeks ago, I ran into an organization at a mental health and wellness fair, and I was very intrigued. I think I had shared with you after. And the organization, they are focusing on a Be Smart campaign. And the leaders, Katherine and Rosch and Layla Danley with Be Smart, which is an organization that was launched in 2015 to really promote gun safety, securing firearm storage. And it really has reduced deaths, and injuries. And so overall, what I've learned from this organization is understanding gun safety, understanding how to inquire about it, how to follow through, really has saved lives over the last 10 years.
Absolutely. You said a statement there, knowledge is power. And I think that is so true. And that goes to why we see change, right? If we have knowledge, we have power and we have power to make change. And I agree with you. I think it's wonderful. I'm excited for today.
Well, right. And whether you like guns or not, the statistics, they say about 4.6 million American children in the, US live in homes with at least one gun that is loaded and unlocked. And so when you think about that, I think sometimes we have a tendency to put our heads in the sand. But when you start to really even educate our children and our families around gun safety, it really can avoid those awful situations. So the more we learn, especially around topics around gun violence or safety or even death by suicide, the more we start to educate even our children about gun safety, the more we are going to protect them as well as those around them. So I'm excited to introduce our two experts today, Katherine Rosch and Layla Danley. Welcome. Would you both like just to tell us a few things about yourselves and for the listeners, and then we'll get started.
So my name's Layla Danley, and I'm the Illinois chapter co-lead for Everytown for Gun Safety Secure Storage Program, Be Smart. I've been involved in gun violence prevention work for about 10 years. As the Illinois co-lead, I help to oversee and coordinate the educational efforts of our Be Smart volunteers all across the state, but I'm also still very involved locally, and I do the Be Smart work for my local area of New Trier Township. I'm also a mom to 2 kids, one in elementary and one in middle school. And I did actually also grow up in a family of gun owners. So I really believe in prevention education as a critical piece of all of the work that needs to be done in order to curb gun violence. And another thing that's really important to me is that I believe that gun violence prevention is really everyone's responsibility. So as you pointed out, in terms of the number of guns that we know are in this country right now and the number of guns in homes that also have children, I think that it takes a village. And I'm just really happy to be here today to talk to you about Be Smart.
My name's Katherine Rosch. I am the lead for McHenry County of Illinois. And so that is what brought us to meet you, Jackie, at the PIN conference at McHenry County College. So with that, I've been doing this work for a couple of years now. I'm going on year 3, primarily in the Be Smart space, a little over a year now. I too grew up in and around firearms. I myself am a FOID card holder, and I've lived in McHenry County for about 8 years now. And the message that it talks about and applying it to being a mom as well and having a child in elementary school and really just opened my eyes to the importance of this topic. And I felt compelled to be one of those people that is sharing it. So with the message that we talk about with secure storage, in addition, we're also giving out resources. We're partnering with local organizations. And that to me was very nice because I really just enjoy the community that I live in. And it's taking me one step further to just meeting so many different organizations through this work that I'm just passionate about, really from being a mom day in and day out and how firearms are impacting children and the number that are out there just from an unintentional standpoint. And like you had mentioned earlier with suicide. So a lot of it is just really a passion that I have inside me that I enjoy doing. And so my work is really focused on McHenry County and the community that I live in, which is also, I think, important too. Changing the lives and whatnot around you, but just how you can impact your actual family. So that's just a little bit about me and Be Smart.
Oh, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your ladies' busy schedule. We're really happy you're here. So tell us a little bit about spreading this message and what your programs are like. What is it that you do and kind of how, if someone encountered you, what they should be expecting?
Yeah. So just like where I met Jackie at the PIN conference, tabling is definitely a part of how we spread the message. I'll just kind of start with Be Smart for kids and kind of what that is. So the program is asking just adults to take 5 simple steps that are going to keep kids and teens from accessing firearms. So it's got the model of SMART. And so the S is securing all guns in your home and vehicles. And so when we're tabling or doing presentations of the Be Smart outline, partnering with other community organizations as well. So we're just really getting the message out that securing all guns in your homes and vehicles, how impactful that is, right? And we'll definitely talk more about that. The M is for modeling the responsible behavior. So, as an adult, we know that responsibility is on us to make sure kids and teens don't have unsupervised access to guns in the first place. So, we don't want to necessarily have the conversation with our children all the time. If you see a firearm, don't touch it. There should just be no unsupervised access. Supervised is a different conversation. So when we're at these tablings or giving these presentations or having these community conversations, we're able to talk to gun owners and non-gun owners alike with all these different simple steps that everyone can take. Another step is for the A in SMART, and that's asking about unsecured guns in other homes. So that's kind of a little bit of a tough one because it depends on kind of the ages of your children, what's happening and going on. Are you there or not, and what not to consider? So there's good information to talk about there as well. The R, recognizing the role of guns and suicide. So there's the wonderful 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. So we know that provides 24/7 support, calling and texting. In order for us to get there, right, we've got to have the conversation and recognizing the lethality that firearms play in this role. So there's a lot that, we can discuss there at the different types of outreaches that we do. And then last is the T. And that's just kind of telling your peers to be smart. And as we're talking now, and certainly at tabling and presentations and such, just really spreading the message. And that is where I really appreciate the simplicity of it, that it's aimed to adults. I mean, that's really what the message is that smart piece. Obviously, you can elaborate on more of it, but it really breaks down nicely.
So secure, model, ask, recognize, entail. SMART. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. And as Katherine said, we work all of us within our own communities, but because we are a national program, we do also have regional, statewide, and national partnerships where we work with other organizations to get the word out. So we partner, for example, with, our statewide American Academy of Pediatrics. On a national level, we partner with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. We partner with the National PTA. So we work really on a number of different levels, and also with a lot of our health departments, local police departments and sheriffs, things like that, organizations like that, just people who are all really on the same page about the concept of safety and making sure that we are keeping our kids safe.
Excellent.
I think another great opportunity for this message and how we share it is the community relationships piece that, Layla was touching on, and those different organizations that are in everybody's community, particularly in America, right? This is in America. The statistics that we're sharing are, just impacting America that our work is touching, but the level of connection that you can make with this message is wonderful, being able to see all the different types of community resources too. So that's a great way to share the message. Is we do have pediatricians doing the Be Smart work. We do have people that are working on the PTA school boards and such like that, so that we can just continue to get this message out to parents and caretakers of children, right? That's where we want to get the message to, are those people.
Do you feel that this is a difficult conversation for many to have, in particular the ask? It sounds like it can be a little bit uncomfortable. What has your experience been, and how have you approached it? And how would you recommend others approach it?
So I think that it's a great question, because it definitely was awkward for me at first. And I was even in this work. We was at a tabling that we had, and I had been asked, how do I ask, by one of my fellow volunteers. And I was like, you know what? I actually haven't had to ask. And I think in just, coming off a pandemic, and the ages of my children are much younger. So I just only have one in elementary. The other two are younger. The opportunity had arisen that I wasn't either directly supervising the play date, or it wasn't at my house. And I don't have firearms in my house at the moment. My partner's just not something he wants. So I had realized in that moment, oh my gosh, I have not asked myself. And I have now many of times. So it's gotten certainly much easier. So I fully understand the awkwardness. But when you just treat it like any other safety issue, like food allergies, pet allergies, what type of screen time access do they have? You can really kind of, wiggle it in there. A method that I'll share, when I kind of schedule that first play date, because my children, again, are younger, I will bring up allergies in the sense that, hey, we're going to be zipping over. My kids usually will, have an Uncrustable in the car on the way over. I want to make sure you don't have any peanut allergies or anything. And that opens up the conversation right away. And I don't have to make anything up. So I think personalizing it to actually something that's just simple, but that applies to your family, allows that conversation to just be reciprocal. And then the next step that I'll do, if it is at a house, or that next opportunity, is ask about, if you do own any firearms, are they secured? You want to be mindful about the implication too that you're passing on when you're sharing it. But it definitely is that first moment you remember when you're doing it. But I think it just gets easier because you can intertwine it, and you do recognize the information behind the secure storage and just how much that can change a play date into a tragedy. So really it just comes down to, doing it and getting it done. And then after you do it that first time, I didn't really hesitate in the uncomfortableness. That's how I do it.
I know for me, I'm learning a lot, even just having this conversation. It sounds like the more, like we talked about in the beginning, the more educated we are, the less awkward it has to feel. Right. And I think schools are even starting to talk about gun safety, which I like. I've noticed several school districts are even recommending that we continue these conversations. And for children, I think sometimes we think if we don't talk about it, children won't know about it. But let's be honest, children will see it on the TV. They'll see it on different things. Video games, is a big thing I see. There's a lot of even, I don't know if you guys, touch on this too sometimes, but children are exposed to guns. So us not talking about it, that's not going to be helpful either.
It's interesting you say that because my 5-year-old and my 9-year-old, they play Roblox. And while we do have as many restrictions as we can, and we are monitoring them playing that, they will come and talk to me when they want to download a new game. It doesn't have any guns, or it has guns, but it's just lasers that come out of them, or, so they go on to describe it because we are having those conversations as young as they are. We do have those conversations, but I think making sure that it's our responsibility, even around the holidays, right? Like when you're going to gather at aunt or uncle's house that you're not usually there, or maybe they don't usually have kids around, and just kind of making sure you're having those ask conversations, not just at the play dates for the younger children like that I have. But so that's funny, that access that they do have to guns. They do see it. They know what they are.
Well, and Jackie, I think to your point, something that's really interesting is when you start to have these conversations in your community, if you can create a community of asking, then people really sort of start to understand why the question is part of a safety conversation, and they come to expect it. In a lot of communities where we've had success in forming partnerships with schools and with law enforcement and things like that, because people are out in the community spreading the word and they're asking their friends and family before play dates and things like that, it just really can become a much more naturalized part of a conversation, so that it doesn't feel like asking is judgmental or awkward or political or weird, right? Because that's what you always think of when you think about talking about guns and asking whether or not somebody has a gun in their home. People think it's awkward. They think it's political. They think it's something that's going to put the other person on the defensive. And so that is really why we sort of try to give people these examples of how to ask the question in a concrete way, and one way that we do it too is to say, assume people have gun ownership. And if you don't want to say, if you have a gun in your home, you can just say something like, how do you secure your firearms? Just assume it, so that there's not sort of an underlying assumption that you might be making a judgment in the way that you ask the question.
I like it because you're really talking about normalizing. It's just simply a conversation. And then that takes that defensiveness away, I think. I really like that. Well, what would you ladies say is the best way to approach, this conversation as a parent, a caretaker of teens, especially those teenagers start to drive? You may not know this, but in the state of Kansas, they actually start driving at the age of 14. Yeah, it happens, right? Even when they're 16, it happens. And you're like, oh my gosh, when those days start to happen, and it changes from those supervised play dates to, they're on their own. What are some tips to talking to adolescents, would you say?
Yeah, so that's really where I'm at. So I've been sort of on the full spectrum of this, from the period of time when my kids were little and we were doing supervised play dates, up to the point where I do now have a teenager who has friends who drive. And so I am living this in my everyday world. And, one of the things that we say in terms of talking to kids at any age really is that we need to make sure that these conversations that we're having are part of any general safety conversation that you're having. So these are conversations that we are hopefully having early and often with our kids. But as your kids get older, you're starting to talk to them about things like driving and alcohol and drugs and vaping and whatever that sort of piece of safety that you're talking to them about, you want to make sure that you're incorporating these conversations with them. So hopefully you've been doing it for a while, but if you haven't, you really need to let them understand that any situation that they are in where there's an unsecured gun is a dangerous situation. So that's a situation that they need to make sure that they can get themselves out of. So we make sure that they understand that they should not be listening to any friend who says that a gun is unloaded or otherwise safe. And you also want to make sure that you give them strategies to get out of that situation. If a gun's present, you can brainstorm those together. You can agree that they have the wording to be able to pull out immediately to say, hey, my mom just texted me and I have to go home right now. And we also want to let them know that it's okay for them to ask about the presence of an unsecured gun in a home that they might be visiting if they feel comfortable doing that. But you can also offer to do that for them if they don't feel comfortable. So, for me right now, my daughter babysits. And so she's going into the homes of people that we may not necessarily know well. These may not be conversations that we are having with them on any kind of a regular basis. So if there's a situation where she feels comfortable asking the parent, then she does that on her own. There are times where she is babysitting for families that we know. There are times when if she doesn't, I will still ask for her, or she can say, hey, my mom wanted me to ask whether or not you have any firearms in your home, and if so, how they're stored. So really sort of empowering them at that age to have conversations, to feel like they can get out of situations is really important. And then I just kind of want to say, too, that with younger kids, we also, again, sort of say that it should be part of a normal safety conversation. So at that point in time, you might be just talking to your kids about making sure that they've got on a bike helmet, making sure that they're looking both ways when crossing the street, whatever that conversation is. With them, you really keep it very simple. If you see a gun, don't touch it. Tell an adult right away. Even if it looks like a toy, don't touch it. That's something that I think has really changed in a number of years. We used to have toy guns that were very much, have colorful and bright and neon and those kinds of things. And a lot of the replica guns now these days that are out really very much do look like real guns. And then also make sure that you let them know that they won't get in trouble if they tell an adult that they've seen a gun. We know that that's something that worries kids, right? They don't want to tell on their friends.
Right.
And then no matter what the age is of the kid, again, just that you're repeating these conversations on a regular basis. Sort of the downside of that I want to point out is that we do still always say that it's an adult's responsibility to prevent unauthorized access to guns. So we also don't want parents or adults, caregivers, to have sort of an overconfident sense of how a child will react if they are in the presence of an unsecured firearm, because you just sort of never know what's going to happen. Kids can be impulsive. We talk a lot about the fact that they don't have full brain development. They can make choices that you don't think that they're going to make. And especially as we get into those teenage years, we start to see it. Again, we really want to make sure that the onus is on adults to make sure that kids don't have unsupervised access to guns in the first place. But we also want to stress that it's important that you do have conversations with your children.
And I will say, I haven't gotten to date an angry response to a text message back or conversation. And I've had a lot of conversations with people, at the table and certainly not when I'm asking about play date, but just because we're having the conversation about what that looks like. We've got some safe examples and access examples, but I will say from the asking perspective, I've never gotten an angry text back. So it's a conversation that's certainly worth having, right? But it's also a conversation I think that is getting more and more awareness and becoming more and more popular. So,
and I will say, I actually have never had a bad response across two kids and, however many years. I have had one instance where somebody canceled a play date. So to be fair, it has happened in the past to me, but it wasn't an angry response. The person wasn't upset about it. And, that's something that we also talk to people about, is if you feel like you're not getting the answers that you are comfortable with, that there are ways to pivot around a conversation. You can offer to host a play date. You can offer to have it in a neutral space like a park or an indoor play space or something like that, which is what we ultimately ended up doing.
Okay. I like that a lot.
I like that too, because I think these conversations are going to become more and more normalized. I think we already do talk about guns. We just don't talk about gun safety as much as we should. And, like we talked about earlier, our children are exposed to them. And so they see them. But, I think these conversations need to happen. Do you have any tips? We have to specify the conversations according to the age. Are there any tips for all ages you would include?
So we've got a great handout that gives some resources. So we'll make sure that we can share that with you guys to have that available. And really, it's just like we kind of pointed out, just the overall tips are having those frequent conversations. I think it just goes to show with, my kids coming to me when we're approaching something new and acknowledging that, firearm, because we're having those conversations and we're making it more of just a common conversation, like surrounding safety. There isn't a conversation about good versus bad. It's just safety. Really just making sure at whatever age it is, if they are there with an unsupervised firearm, that it is a dangerous situation, that they need to get away from that situation, find an adult, leave the room, etc., no matter how old they are.
Well, thank you, ladies. This is such a great conversation, and I think our listeners are going to truly enjoy, and hopefully this sparks a lot of conversations out there with the listeners and parents and families of, how are we going to address it? And thank you for being a great resource. Jackie, do you have any other questions, or can we move on to our 3 questions?
I think you can move on. This was covered very nicely.
Thank you. Can I just quickly point out that we do have on our website, we have a way it's besmartforkids.org. And we know that you guys are national and you have a reach all over. And there is a way to contact us. There's a little contact us button. So no matter where you are in the country, if you're interested in being connected with Be Smart educator and volunteer who's local to you, if you just fill out that contact us form, then that will be passed on to the person who is in whatever state that you live in, person like me if you're in Illinois, and we will connect you and we will help get you set up with resources and information that you can get out into your own communities.
Excellent. Thank you. That is great to know. And listeners, we will have all of that information in the description of the episode. So here we go. These are 3 questions that we ask every guest. You may choose to answer 1, 2, or all 3 of the questions. It is your choice. Let me read the questions. Number 1, what did you do as a child or teenager that would drive your parents crazy? And number 2, what's the biggest difference between children and teenagers today and when you grew up? And number 3, what does successful parenting mean to you? Take it away. Let us know which one or all 3. What do you want to do?
So this is Layla, and I like the successful parenting question. So I think for me, it really means that my kids feel loved and protected, that they feel confident and happy, and that they always know that I'm on their side, even if we disagree about something, that they know that I'm doing that to help them and that I support them in whatever it is that they're doing.
Ditto to Layla. I like that a lot. As far as successful parenting sounds, for sure. I really like the second question. So I think every generation at some point can look back on just technology. And I think the level of access that kids have today compared to like how I grew up isn't as similar because, they're just born into it. But the first Macintosh my dad had in our home, and each house that I grew up in literally had a dedicated computer room. So we had the portable phones that turned to the cell phones that added texting. And so I've really kind of been around it a lot, which I think giving the perspective of what our children can access today at such a young age. I mean, my youngest can swipe around on the iPad, no problem. He was 2. And so it's just like mind boggling, having the knowledge of how technology can, truly impact our children and just bringing them back to experience kind of those core memories. And when we didn't have access to the world in the palm of our hands, that's really just how my partner and I stay connected with our children through the differences between, children growing up today and when I grew up. So it's hilarious, that first head tilt that you get when you hear the slang and you're like, what are you talking about? So it's just the gap, I guess, that you notice is hilarious, but it's also bittersweet.
Yes. Well, thank you, ladies. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, I really appreciated our time today. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you all have a great day.
Yes. Goodbye, Jackie.
Goodbye. Goodbye, Robin. Goodbye, Layla. And goodbye, Katherine. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and make sure to subscribe and like us to catch our next episode, where we will take you on a journey to find new ways of successful parenting.